So we've let our starter ferment on the counter overnight, and this morning we're going to make bread. I usually get up and as soon as breakfast is over, go ahead and mix up the bread. So I'm going to mix it up just in this bowl and with a spoon. I could use my mixer, but I want to show you that anybody in the world, and that's Eli, anybody in the world can make this bread. You don't need any fancy mixers or whatever. This is all, so no complaining. You can make your own bread. What we're going to do is your starter will be a little bit poofy on top. And it might look a little separated, but we're going to stir it. Now last night I made this with honey granules, but like we flashed in the video, I will tell you that white sugar makes the best one. So we're going to put that all in there. I've already measured everything out in advance so that it wouldn't take too long for me to measure. Normally I would just measure everything back down in here, so I only have one dish. But I just made a whole bunch of dishes for myself. For you! You're welcome! Now we need 1.5 cups of warm water. Last night I told you the temperature didn't matter. Today it does because we don't want to kill our yeast. So we've got that. Now I'm going to get the yeast out of the freezer and we'll dissolve that in our mixture. I use 1 tablespoon. If you don't buy your yeast in bulk, you can just use if you don't buy your yeast in bulk, you can just use 1 package. It's 2 1/4 teaspoons, so it's a little bit less. So it might take your bread a little bit longer to rise, but 1 pack is still plenty. So usually I just mix that up a little bit and I'm going to let it sit until it dissolves a little. The reason I make this bread in the morning is because it never takes the same amount of time to rise. Some days it will rise really fast, and then some days it takes forever. So if you want to make this, it's a good idea to be at home all day, because if you're not at home all day, what's going to happen is you're going to leave and then you'll come back and your bread will be everywhere. Or if you plan this for dinner and you make it in the morning, what's going to happen is your company will come over and your bread will still be raisin. So don't count on this. It's so good and so delicious, but it'll be just as good the next day. So just make it the day before you need it. Now, I've mixed that in there and it looks nice and dissolved. Now, 1/2 cup of oil. I'm using sunflower oil from Trader Joe's, but you can use whatever you have. You can actually even use melted butter. Olive oil. I would not use sesame oil because it's a little strong. I definitely wouldn't use toasted sesame oil because now you've just made your bread cost $4 million. And isn't the point of homemade bread that it's cheap and tasty and delicious? No sesame oil. Okay, here we go. Now we need a tablespoon of salt. I usually add that when I add the flour, so we'll do that. Salt and yeast don't really like each other, so now I'm going to put in 1/4 cup of honey. That's what makes it delicious. And I'm going to use my finger and get it all out, because that, my kids are hollering for me to do things when I've tried to tape this video. But isn't that what real life is about? Now I've got my 1/4 cup honey. I've got all my liquids in there. Now I'm going to start adding my flour. I'm going to need about 6 cups. I'm using fresh ground hard white wheat, but you can use white flour, you can use white bread flour, you can use white wheat from, I think King Arthur makes it. A couple other companies make it. King Arthur makes the best. Now I'm going to put in 3 cups and then I'm going to add my salt. Okay, I'm going to mix that together. It's super easy. Salt and yeast don't go well together, so I usually try to add my salt whenever I'm adding my flour. I would not use 100% wheat from the store in this, because then that will make your bread like a brick. I just don't have have never had any success with that. That's why I was so glad when we got our Nutri-Milk, because I can make my own 100% wheat. If you try to use that from the store, sometimes you'll end up with a brick loaf. It's a brick bread. So, if you're going to use store flour, use white wheat or just plain white bread flour. Now, don't forget your salt, because bread without salt is pretty yucky. And if you do make a brick bread, it always makes yummy croutons or French toast. Now I'm going to add my other 3 cups of flour. One of the best parts about this particular recipe is that you don't really have to knead. So we're just mixing this together in the bowl, and then when it gets nice and mixed together, which is kind of a kneading, then we will, whoops, gotta make sure and stir it out. It's part of bread making. Flour everywhere. I love wooden spoons, they're my favorite. This is just going to rise after we get it all mixed together. I'll probably turn it out onto something, and then I like to turn things out and then grease my bowl and then put it back into rise, because then I don't worry that it's going to stick to the bowl too bad. So it's not super dry or super, like some breads that you make are really stiff, and this one is not. So now I've got it all mixed together. So make sure I got my water and my starter and my yeast and my oil and my salt and my honey and my flour. So we got it all in there. As you can see, it's mixed, but it's not stiff. Now, I'm going to turn that out. Right here. And now I'm just going to pour a little oil in my bowl. This just keeps it from sticking too bad. Doesn't take very much. I also do this to my loaf pans depending on which ones I'm using. Whoop. And I just whoop. Oil all around. And I'll put this back in. And flip it over so it's covered with oil. And now it's really not sticky. Now I'm going to set that to the side and let it raise. Now, I told you it's not going to take the same amount of time every time. You can put it in your oven and let it raise, but I actually like to let this raise long and slow because it tastes so much better. So I usually don't try to hurry up this rise. Now, sometimes if I make other bread, I'll turn on the light in my oven, cover this and set it in there. But my problem is I'm forgetful. So oh, it's time to make dinner, and I'll run over and I turn on and preheat the oven, and I'll be like, what's that smell? And actually I've still got shower cap around the edge of this bowl where I accidentally started trying to cook it in the bowl. So I'm just going to set this to the side whenever I don't have sticky hands, and I'll cover it. I'll either use a shower cap, shower caps work great, or just a towel and just let it rise. And when it rises double, we'll come back and we'll put it in our loaf pans and let it rise again.